Ryan Nobles, you know that history. Oh, it's ugly. It's ugly.
You've been at WIBX 5 years? That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a shocker.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, 5 years, I think, in like March or something like that. I don't know.
No,
it's already 5 years.
It's already happened.
No, the breaking point is the longest I've ever worked there anywhere is 5 years and 3 months. That's why March comes into play. So
you probably shouldn't be reminding your bosses of this. You might not realize.
Oh, they've already got the box with my name on it. Right, ready to go. All right, Ryan. So, boy, what do we have to talk about here? First of all, I think the president is outsmarting the Democrats right now. What do you think?
Do you?
I do think I do.
What front?
I think this whole shutdown was a debacle, and they're in a position right now where they're not going to shut things down. They're going to have to put a deal together. The president's saying, "I'll deal with you, but you got to do something for me over on the wall." I think he's going to end up with a deal.
Well, I do think that the Democrats calculated pretty poorly in the last shutdown. They realize now that they definitely came out the losers in that whole exercise. And basically that one slim bit of leverage that they had to negotiate with the president is gone. And when he senses that he has the upper hand, he is not going to cede any ground. So I do think you're right that they are in a stronger position than they were prior to this whole conversation. And the question is, where do we end up? And, you know, the president himself has said that he wants a deal for the Dreamers, but does that come in association with some sort of big spending promise for a border wall? Does it end things like chain migration and the visa lottery? Those are things that we still have yet to see. But the one thing for sure is that the Democrats have lost the leverage of using the budget process as the way to prevent this all from happening. So at this point, they just have to kind of hope that Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell make good on their promise, because it seems pretty clear that they're not going to take the risk of shutting down the government again because the political costs are just too high.
State of the State. We've both watched many State of the State addresses. Was this
State of the Union?
State of the Union. I'm sorry. You don't really.
We've watched
watch
a lot
this.
of State of the State addresses as well.
We have. Those are much different. That includes a PowerPoint. That's what Cuomo likes. All right. So State of the Union. How different was this one? I'm going to play a clip that was actually on CNN where Representative Tenney says, really doubled down on what the president said, that this was un-American what the Democrats did. What's your take?
I think that the president has overplayed his hand with this a little bit. I mean, the idea that he would, and I know that the White House tried to run this back and claim that he was only joking around, but the idea that you'd throw around the word treason because somebody doesn't clap for you during a speech is kind of laughable and ridiculous. I think that when you're the party that's not in power, the State of the Union is an awkward and an uncomfortable exercise, and Republicans were in the same position when Barack Obama was president for 8 years.
Well, and John Boehner was sitting right behind the president, not clapping.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that you have to go all the way back to George W. Bush in the wake of 9/11 for the last time that you saw a truly bipartisan rousing support for President's speech. And so, I think the president has to be a little bit more self-aware in these situations that, this is a party that is directly in opposition of you and your policies. They don't favor the things that you're saying. Why would they stand up and clap if they don't agree with your policy?
Well, let me play the clip here from Claudia Tenney. Listen to this.
Because you brought up the State of the Union, which the president brought up yesterday when he was in Ohio. And here's what he had to say about some of your fellow lawmakers on the other side.
Even on positive news, really positive news like that, they were like death and un-American. Un-American. Somebody said treasonous. I mean, I guess why not? Can we call that treason? Why not? I mean, they certainly didn't seem to love our country very much.
All right. Now, that is the president, I think, Ryan. I think he is joking, and he's being Donald Trump. But then Claudia Tenney, in this interview, really doubled down.
Un-American, treasonous, don't love our country very much. Would you agree with that?
I would say it was un-American, and they don't love our country. I don't know if I'd go as far as treasonous, but
and they don't love our country. Wow.
Yeah, and I think that this has been a problem with the Trump administration, that he somehow has decided that a love for the president equals a love for the country. And what I mean, not a love for the office of the presidency, but a love for Donald J. Trump and his persona. And that's where you get into dangerous territory. He's talking about a military parade down Pennsylvania Avenue where he's going to stand and salute the soldiers as they go by. I mean, it just reeks of a totalitarian system. And I'm not saying he's getting to that point, but I don't remember which member of Congress it was, but there was a Democratic member of Congress that said the whole point of our Constitution is that we live in a society where you can sit on the floor of the United States House of Representatives while the President of the United States is speaking and not clap. That's what the First Amendment protects. And you can love your country and not support the president's policies. And the idea that you have to stand and clap for everything he says, even if you're a member of Congress, and if you don't do that, that somehow you're not American, just flies in the face of what America is all about. And I just think that you're getting into dangerous territory there. I don't think there's a problem with Republicans defending the president if they support him.
Sure. Yeah.
And you can complain all you want about Democrats not clapping, and maybe there is some level of criticism that is fair. If they're not clapping because the economy is doing well, that maybe there is a level of criticism that can be handed down there. But that's un-American.
I thought the president, though, was artful in the way that he would talk about, maybe we're talking about some member of the military that saved lives, but then he'd throw in the wall. So Democrats are like, oh, my God, I got to clap for the military guy, but I can't clap for the wall. And so they didn't clap. I thought that was quite artful. He really put Democrats in a position where they could be criticized afterwards for not clapping, I think. It was written that way.
He did, he used the Lenny Sputnik technique, which was Ronald Reagan was the first to do that when he brought Lenny Sputnik, who was the average Washingtonian that rushed into the Potomac and saved people after a plane crash. And ever since then, every president has sprinkled the audience with real people. Generally, what they do is they get them all done in the very front end of the speech, and then they get into the policy issues after that. But what Trump did was he sprinkled them out throughout the entire speech. So you were kind of in a position where you had to be clapping for these average Americans.
Yeah.
And then as a result, he was able to tie his policy positions into that.
I don't want to keep harping on this MS-13, though, but I did think the highlights that we're talking about here coincided with some of the issues that he's pushing. I guess that's just my opinion. When he talks about, because I'm sorry, before I go on a tangent, I just think that Republicans are positioned as anti-immigration so far as Republicans are just racist and they hate anybody from any other country. And I think he's trying to make the case the opposite way, that, listen, minorities are being negatively impacted in that case where the parents lost their child, they were murdered. I think that's his way of saying, look, it's not all just white guys who don't want undocumented immigrants coming in here.
No, I know. I think you're right, Jeff. I think there's a point to be made there. And I think that's probably an area where he has fallen short in making the argument against illegal immigration. I think there are a lot of Americans who have Latino or Latina heritage who came through the process the legal and correct way, who are just as fired up about people coming into the country illegally as you say, white guys that live in suburbia.
Right.
And I think that is a point that the president would probably be well served in articulating a little bit better. The problem is, and we've had this conversation before about immigration, is he's taken such a hard line on it that there's just no opportunity for compromise. And so when you continue to take such a hard line, are you really interested in solving the problem, or are you interested in scoring political points? And I think that's a criticism that could be directed both at the president and Democrats that won't give on border security at all either.
I'll make an analogy, and interesting. I've spent some time in family court. We're at a point where you're just before the family court trial, and you got a mother and a father that are vying for the custody of their children, and everything they do, I've been through this. Everything they do during that period leading up to the trial is done to show the court, look what I'm doing here. Look how I'm handling the situation. Look how I'm doing this, is to score political points, if you will, with the judge, to be able to become victorious on the other side. I find that that's where we are in Washington. There's no thought of what's right for the country right now. It's all about scoring political points with the judge that would ultimately be the people who are pulling the voting lever, or we used to pull the lever.
And it's not, and Bill, to take it even a step further, it's not even necessarily the general electorate that these politicians are directing at. It's the primary electorate. So it's like, a quarter of the voters in their own party. I mean, I think that's the thing we often forget, is that when you talk about primary voters, you're not even talking about all Republicans or all Democrats. You're talking about maybe 35 to 40% of Republicans that actually show up on primary day. And we've reached a state in American politics where that's who all these politicians are talking to. Best example of this, last night, our Chris Cuomo got a lengthy, very interesting interview with Joe Biden, who's clearly positioning himself to run for president. And Joe Biden, who I think most people would kind of view as being somewhat of a moderate guy, positioning himself to run for president of the United States, claimed that he was one of the most liberal senators in the United States Senate. He said that himself, trying to make that argument. Would Joe Biden have done that 4 years ago? I mean, but in order to win the Democratic primary in 2020, he's got to get to the left of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Kirsten Gillibrand. And so that's what he's doing. And that's a perfect example of where American politics is coming. It's not just on the Republican side, it's on the Democratic side as well.
Well, we're seeing it in the 22nd congressional district here right now. You've got Claudia Tenney, who is as tight as you can get to the president, even coming out in this interview on CNN and saying, look here, Mr. President, look what I'm doing. I'm doubling down on what you said. And we had Anthony Brindisi on the other day, who actually called the president a deal maker, coming to the center. Claudia really seems to be latching on to the president. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this district, which the president really carried overwhelmingly here during the 2016 race.
It's a top 10 competitive race in the country. There's no doubt about it. And we talk about it a lot. It harkens back to 2006, Ray Meyer versus Mike Arcuri. I think it's going to get that level of attention. I think the dynamics are a little bit different than they were, more than 10 years ago now, but I don't think there's any doubt that race is going to be one of the closest in the country, no question. And
that the district, you're absolutely right about the comparison. The only difference I'd say is the district. You're right; it's completely different. It's actually been redrawn.
Oh yeah,
and been redrawn.
Right. It's been redrawn.
Ryan,
it is.
The release of the memo. We've heard from Republicans. This was going to be it. This is going to prove everything. Then we hear from the president saying, I have been completely vindicated. Other Republicans saying, not Trey Gowdy coming out and saying, not so much. On the other hand, you have Democrats saying, this is going to crumble the democracy. The union will fall. Little over-exaggeration on both sides. Who wins in this one?
Oh, my gosh. I wish, it's funny you mentioned that. I was in New York over the weekend. I had to work in New York for CNN on Friday and Monday morning, so we had the family and did the whole New York thing. And when the memo came out, it was like Friday afternoon, and I was in a museum in New York City wrangling 4 kids, and I wanted to find one thing that I could read that would give me some sort of unbiased interpretation of exactly what happened. And even by that point, the memo had only been out for an hour. Everything was about the analysis of it and the political pandering. And I just think you're right, Bill. I don't think the memo is this dramatic bombshell that destroys everyone. And I think the president has certainly overplayed his hand by saying that it outright vindicates him. It's
almost like, I hate to do this, Ryan, but I'm out of time. But if the sky is falling, we just don't believe anybody anymore because we don't follow through on what we think. Ryan, let's continue this next week. I appreciate it. As always, Ryan Noble, CNN.
Yep. Hopefully you're still working there, Bill.
I hope so. We're getting close. Thanks so much.